You're about to hear one of the strangest, most haunting disappearances in modern American history. A young man called his parents in the middle of the night. He sounded calm. He needed help. They stayed on the line for nearly an hour, until he shouted, "Oh shit," and vanished. No more words. No more sound. And to this day, no more Brandon. This is the story of the mystery of disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old college student from Marshall, Minnesota. He was a bright, quiet kid who loved science and was studying wind energy at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby. The spring semester had just come to an end, when on the night of May 13, 2008, Brandon went to two different parties to celebrate. He was seen drinking at both parties, but according to his friends, he didn't drink enough to become overly intoxicated. Around 1:30 a.m. on May 14th, he got in his car and began the drive home to Marshall, a 30-mile trip. The route Brandon drove from the gathering in Canby to Marshall was familiar to him. It was the same route along Minnesota State Highway 68 that he had taken every day to attend classes. But for some reason, he avoided the highway and took the back roads. But something went wrong. At 1:54 a.m., Brandon called his parents. He told them he'd driven his Chevy Lumina into a ditch. He wasn't hurt, but the car was stuck. He thought he was near the town of Lind, just a few miles from home. His parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, got in their truck and headed out to pick him up. While driving, they stayed on the phone with Brandon. The call lasted 47 minutes. They flashed their headlights and honked the horn, hoping he'd see them, but he didn't. He said he couldn't see any lights at all. So Brandon told them, "I'm going to walk toward Lind. Meet me at the town's edge." He described his surroundings: fences, gravel roads, the sound of water. His voice was calm. He didn't seem panicked, just annoyed. His parents drove up and down Highway 68. Still nothing. Then, at 2:30 a.m., the calm was shattered. Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit!" There was a shufflesome kind of noise and the line went dead. His parents tried calling back over and over. No answer. By 6:30 a.m., they called police. But the first response was disheartening. Local police initially didn't take their concerns seriously, stating that it wasn't unusual for a young man his age to stay out all night. Deputies advised them to just be patient and wait for him to return on his own. It took hours before a search began. Lyon County Sheriff Eric Wallen said that Brandon's phone was working well into the next day, and that officers continued to try calling it and getting his voicemail. "We were able to use the cell phone tower technology to have an idea of where his last communications or phone calls came from. So that put us on a cell tower up in that area," said Wallen. So then the search was focused there and the car was located. They found his car in a ditch off a gravel road. It wasn't damaged. It had just slid into the ditch and drivable, but intact. His car keys were missing, along with his cell phone, but there were no obvious signs of foul play. The vehicle simply looked like it was stuck in the ditch, or partially in the ditch. There was nothing odd about it. If a person passed by, they would think it was just parked there, or broken down and stuck. The search dogs also picked up the scent of human remains a few times near Mud Creek, north of Porter. However, nothing pertinent to the case was ever recovered there. Wallen said that investigators had also done extensive excavation work on the river. As late as 2021, there were still teams sifting through the dirt in search of Brandon's remains. The trail led from the car down a gravel road, through fields, and toward the Yellow Medicine River. Then the scent stopped cold. Over the next weeks and months, authorities scoured the area. Cadaver dogs, helicopters, divers, volunteers, nothing. No clothing, no phone, no body. Just silence. Interestingly, the canine teams picked up Brandon's scent on a piece of farm equipment nearby. But the farmer to whom it belonged refused to let authorities search his property. At this point, Ken Anderson of Emergency Support Services realized that several promising areas couldn't be searched because of a variety of thorny legal conflicts revolving around landowner permissions. Local cattle farmers, for example, didn't want police search dogs on their property. 14 years later, investigators were still having problems with this issue. In at least a couple of circumstances, that problem is still in existence, Anderson confirmed. They will not allow us on their property. We don't dispute the reason why. We try and work out a method that would make it acceptable, and we've not been able to come up with a working compromise. County Sheriff Bill Flatten worked with emergency support services on requesting landowner permission, helping to create an access schedule for the farmland so that investigators and search teams could work around the planting and harvest seasons. The problem, he said, usually arises when law enforcement doesn't have probable cause. Although most property owners try to be accommodating, they know their property and they search it and look around as well. Another facet to the complication, according to Anderson, has been that specialized canine scent work is a precious and time-sensitive resource. In the whole state of Minnesota, there have been no more than 3 dogs available at any given time with the capability for this kind of search. The problem is that, as time goes on, it becomes much more complicated to fulfill the search because you need to have canines that have experience in aged scent. It is important to note that due to a childhood eye injury, Brandon Swanson was legally blind in his left eye, leading him to have depth perception issues. He had to wear glasses for this condition, but for unknown reasons on the night of his disappearance. He left his glasses in his car. There were many unmarked cisterns in the area, and authorities have considered the possibility that Brandon could have fallen into one. Additionally, it was just under 40 degrees that night. So it's also plausible that Brandon succumbed to hypothermia, especially if he fell into the river. Despite the fact that he had been drinking that night, his parents were adamant that their son sounded perfectly lucid, albeit alarmed, during their phone call. So, what happened to Brandon? Theory 1. He fell into the river and drowned. But the river was shallow and calm, and no body has ever been recovered. Theory 2. He stumbled into an abandoned well or was killed by hidden machinery in the pitch dark. Theory 3. Someone else was out there that night. A stranger, lurking in the dark, waiting. And then there's Theory 4. Something else entirely. Something that doesn't add up. A timeline that's too strange. Scream that doesn't sound like fear of a fall, but fear of something seen. Brandon's parents never stopped searching. They kept their porch light on every night for years. In 2009, thanks to their efforts, Minnesota passed Brandon's law requiring immediate investigation of adult disappearances. Still, no sign of Brandon. Some properties near the search zone have never been explored due to ownership issues. Some say he's out there, buried in a spot no one has checked. Today, Brandon Swanson would be in his 30s, but for his family, he's forever 19 lost somewhere in the dark. One minute he was talking, the next, gone, and the world never heard from him again. If you know anything, contact the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Even one small detail could bring peace. Till then, the light stays on, and the mystery of Brandon Swanson lives on.